Cardinal O'Malley, Archbishop of Boston. Thank you, Eminence. We are absolutely grateful and moved that you are here, really. We have Giorgio Vittadini from Italy, is talking from Italy. We have RIRO MANISCALCO and Jonathan Fields. I believe that no more words are necessary here. So I will start with Giorgio Vittadini, who most probably has been the second person to, after Cardinal Scola, to meet Monsignor back in, I don't know, he will tell us probably. So I have this question, this first question. How did it happen? Where did you meet Monsignor first? And so, and also if you want to tell us something about what do you think is the contribution that Monsignor gave to the life of the church and of society in America? So I will start with these questions. Giorgio, is up to you.
I began to come to US, I think in 1994. And after 1 year, I asked Cardinal Scola, who could help me, life of the movement in US. And he suggested some names. One of them was Lorenzo Albacete. And I went to Lorenzo. He was living in Washington, and I met him. I didn't understand what was his connection with the movement. So I began to speak generally about life, church, the possibility of a collaboration. He was looking at me, and then at the end said, "What? At last you got here. I was waiting you. I am waiting you for a long time. And therefore, I am very happy to stay with you because I am of the movement." Because Cardinal Scola didn't speak me clearly about Lorenzo. So I discovered that he was of the movement, but no one in Washington had contact with him. People of Washington knew about Lorenzo Albacete, but no one asked him to do something. And immediately something beautiful was born among us, a big friendship, because he was so passionate, so intelligent, and so full of desire of doing something for the church, for the movement in US. And what? I think that in many years I understood it. Lorenzo was able to understand one of the goal of the presence of a Catholic Church in US. And I understood very well this when Jean Paul II went to US. And Jean Paul II spoke about the contribution of Spanish culture to the American Catholic Church, and not only to American Catholic Church, but to the destiny of US. I can summarize it this way. It's so strange that in the American Constitution, freedom is in the Constitution. For example, in Italy, we don't have freedom, we have work. Instead, the destiny of American people is freedom, is happiness. But Lorenzo was saying, how could you get freedom and happiness if you don't have an experience where human desire can be helped to live in a communion, where you live a presence who change you, who is able to give you the impossible unity, the impossible peace. In the American history, this desire is still present, but in many, many situations. I think about civil war, about the wars with native Indians, the racism. In many, many occasions, it was a desire who couldn't be obtained. Instead, if you live a true Catholic experience, you begin a newness. In this community, you are able to live something new, something positive for you, but not only for you, but for everyone. So, Catholic experience is not a part of American destiny, but something connected with American destiny, which that can be useful for helping everyone to live this unity. Is a culture able to help everyone. And his life was an example of this, because he didn't live inside the church, but he was living this passion, this friendship, this positivity with everyone. Think about his collaboration with New York Times and other non-Catholic environment. You think about his book about the presence in Ritz Hotel is not a Catholic environment. So the main contribution is this idea that living Christian community, living Catholic communion, you can be useful for everyone. You can be a possibility of unity because you give an example that everyone can see. And in this direction, the Spanish contribution to the Catholic Church is very important because it's not an ethnic contribution, but is an accent, a way of living that completes the English and Irish character of American church. It's not something that is less important. And when Jean Paul II spoke about this possibility, Lorenzo wrote a lot of writings, very interesting to suggest it. I think that now this is very, very important because you understand now that American nation, US needs unity. That is not so for granted that unity is because you are American, because now you have division not between US and other part of the world, but inside US. And so it's so important to have a Catholic contribution for unity, for peace, for accepting people who are different from you, immigrants. And I think that this is the main contribution of Monsignor, something that many, many people didn't understand many years ago and now.
Thank you, Giorgio. I would like to ask something to RIRO. RIRO is a fake writer, although everybody reads his books. He's a fake musician, although we sing his songs, but he's also the president of the New York Encounter, and that is not fake. So RIRO, you were on the road with Monsignor for several years. What that meant for you? You have to unmute yourself.
Sorry. I was saying that Lorenzo was certainly not the most physically active person But when it came to traveling for Jesus, as he would say, he was unstoppable. You know, I was looking at the US map yesterday, thinking of what was going to happen this morning. And I was thinking, okay, look, we went from Maryland to Virginia, Pennsylvania, all the way down to the Carolinas, Florida, and then deep into the country, Kansas, Illinois, Missouri, Michigan, Wisconsin. Actually, in Wisconsin at Marquette University in '99, we had the first presentation of Father Giussani's work with Lorenzo. And then Indiana, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Texas, Colorado, Arizona, California, all the way up to Washington State. But the most surprising thing was to see that wherever we went, his fame preceded him. Whether he had already been there or not, they knew him or they knew of him. But even more surprising than that to me was that it was very evident that Lorenzo was there giving his life, his intelligence, his knowledge, his wit, his humor for the work of another. And if on the road I was kind of his squire, he looked like Giussani's squire, because he was certain that that was the way, the method to follow, and therefore the testimony to give wherever we went. He had embraced it fully and completely because that method, that experience had embraced him, and he felt embraced, and he would always, give testimony to that. And for a free spirit like him, with a number of weaknesses like we all have, but also an unquenchable curiosity and an unstoppable need to understand, the friendship with Giussani, the discovery of the movement, was the one thing that carried him all around the country. On the road, this was all very well on display. Olivietta, I can't hear you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So no, I was asking, how was he with the people that he met? Some were in the movement, others were not. But so what was interesting to him when he was meeting these people?
What was interesting was each and every person. We visited communities, but we also went where one single person, for whatever reason, had expressed interest, curiosity towards the movement or towards the faith. And somehow, he had come in contact with us, with the CL office or one of us. And, and oftentimes for these people, Lorenzo's visit was such a powerful experience that it would mean the beginning of a new community. It had that kind of impact. And that for Lorenzo himself was the visible confirmation of the gift he had received, of the encounter he had had, because that was his concern, that each and every person could experience the encounter with Christ in the flesh of a companionship. And because he believed that Jesus was everything and everybody, he could talk to philosophers, thinkers, blue collars, housewives, high school students. It would make no difference. He could talk at a big conference, at a theological gathering, or over dinner at a fried chicken joint, possibly over dinner at a fried chicken joint.
Thank you, Riro. Jonathan, you are a real musician. So the very simple question, what does it still mean for you personally, having met Monsignor? How does he still have an impact in your life? How?
I was thinking about that, and I think what struck me about Monsignor, I am one of those American, Giorgio was talking, American people with desire without ever being able to obtain it. I come from a secular Jewish family, tons of desire, but just really unstable. You know, I had a very difficult time with relationships as I was growing up. Work, you know, just all over the place. It's exactly what Giorgio was describing. And but I also had this deep, I guess, artistic, poetic sense that I knew that there was something out there. And what struck me about Monsignor more than anything was that he was a poet, and that being a poet means, and maybe a Christian poet, I guess, a Spanish Christian poet, I don't know, but that type of feeling, human feeling for reality, allowing things to impact him, people, events. His like Giorgio was saying, he loved the church and loved America. He loved his people. He just had such a intimate passion for everybody. But through, and I would say this, what I mean by poetic, a melancholy, a real sadness. And I think that was something deep in my own soul too. You know, that as an American, you're kind of pushed to succeed and to blow past any of those brokennesses and those, you know, or at least I was, you know, and in a sense, Monsignor was so free with that part of himself. And he, even with me, when I would call him in trouble or in crisis, he would usually tell me about his crisis. And basically he would, at the end, I would be trying to help him, you know, but that's how that was his therapeutic method, I guess, you know. So, and then you could see he, you know, at least for my family, my Jewish secular family, I was so excited when I met him. Also when I met the movement, because it seemed like a movement of poets. Everybody was a poet in the movement. Everyone was an artist. There was that, everything I'd been looking for was answered in the way Giussani spoke about things, the way my friend, it was so enraptured with that part of myself I could never have a language for. You know, Albacete had that language for it. And so I wanted to share, you know, I introduced him to my mother, my father. When we went to California, I called my sister, you have to meet this guy. And he was happy to meet my Jewish, very secular people, like Vita was saying. And he just was so open. Also my boss, David Horowitz. But I would say, if you want to say how it recently affected me, this feeling, Monsignor didn't feel you had to solve problems. You just had to feel life. And by feeling life, you were already beginning to have faith and feeling the pain of life. So I remember there was a special that Helen Whitney did where he talked about September 11th. He said, well, everybody was trying to come up with answers. He says, well, can't you just feel it? Feel the pain, allow that to happen. And then, so when the thing happened at the Capitol on the 6th, I remember calling a few people and I was just so shocked. And the first thing I thought is, oh man, what would have Lorenzo been thinking now with everything going on, you know? And I understand what Giorgio was saying about this unity, but for me, I just thought about feeling it, feeling the sorrow, like Jesus wept over Jerusalem. Albacete, I know, would be weeping now for our country. That type of sensitivity of what destiny is, what a country's supposed to mean, what history is, what salvation is for, and having the sensitivity of Christ who could weep, and just allowing myself to be there. That's how I feel I've carried him in my soul.
Thank you, Jonathan. Eminence, first of all, thank you again for being here. We know very well, or we think we know, how your calendar is. So the first question is, as I asked other people, so you met Monsignor when he was still probably not even a seminarian. How was he like? And the other question I have is, given his unusual personality, how you and people around felt about his decision to become a priest?
Thank you, Olivette. When I finished my studies in philosophy at the Capuchin Seminary, St. Fidelis of Sigmaringen, I was sent to Washington in 1965 as young Brother Sean of Lakewood to study at Capuchin College of St. Francis at Catholic University. They were very tumultuous times. The church was in a certain amount of upheaval following Vatican II and the proclamation of Humani Vitae. I was in Washington for the assassination of Martin Luther King, civil rights movement. It was also the time of the Vietnam War and much social unrest of the 60s. And in the midst of all of that, in God's providence, I met one of the most remarkable and unforgettable members of the human race. As I said at Lorenzo's funeral oration, Graham Greene, Evelyn Waugh, and Garcia Marquez together did not have enough imagination to invent Father Lorenzo Albacete Sintron. Only God could create a Lorenzo, and then he broke the mold because the world did not deserve two Lorenzos. But we must be careful not to be so dazzled by Lorenzo's incredible sense of humor. There was so much more to Lorenzo. What was out there included his zany wit, his unkempt appearance, his disorganized life, his financial problems, his phobias, and his eccentricities. But as Erasmus said of Thomas More, he was made and born for friendship. What a capacity for unconditional love. He made everyone feel at home, and you knew that you were his friend. Lorenzo's was not an easy life, and his problems were a great source of anxiety to those of us who were close to him. There were many false starts. Lorenzo's meteoric career as president of the Pontifical University of Puerto Rico, his very short tenure at Dunwoody Seminary, and his truncated career as a writer for the Sunday magazine of the New York Times. Lorenzo's greatest attribute beyond his intellectual brilliance was his don de gente, his people skills. He had a sense of connection that made people feel accepted, appreciated, and important. St. Francis of Assisi aspired to be a universal brother. Lorenzo Albacete was a universal friend. He made friends with the glitterati as well as with the Anawim. He had friends who were believers and others who were atheists. Some were monarchists, others were anarchists. And they came in all sizes, shapes, and colors. He was friend of popes, media personalities, cultural icons, and the little people, the saints next door, as Pope Francis calls them. Lorenzo communicated an unconditional love and acceptance that attracted people from every walk of life, but especially the young. For Lorenzo, science and religion, faith and reason were all part of a coherent vision that brought hope to so many people looking for meaning. His friendship with Don Giussani was a great grace in his life and allowed Lorenzo to touch the lives of so many people in the extraordinary service in his role in communion liberation. The movement brought Lorenzo a sense of purpose and direction, as well as friendship with people like Olivetta that allowed his ministry to flourish. Personally, Lorenzo's exit from this world to God's writs in eternity has left a great void in my life. I miss the many meals that we shared. It was often junk food at the Sizzler or the IHOP at 1 o'clock in the morning, where we'd be eating chocolate chip pancakes. But the pièce de résistance was always the conversation and the joy of our friendship, never the food. The other thing I particularly miss is how Lorenzo and I would read books together, particularly novels written by contemporary Latin American authors like Garcia Marquez, Vargas Llosa, Isabel Allende. We'd invariably find certain phrases and purple patches that delighted us, in which we become part of a secret code of communication that spiced our conversations and afforded us much to laugh about. St. Francis once said that the saints did all the work and then we get the credit for talking about it. I feel that way about my talking about Lorenzo today, but I thank God for his friendship that made such an impact on my life. Reader's Digest used to have a column regularly called The Most Unforgettable Character. Watching that wonderful video that you prepared and the Lorenzo Albacete show makes it very obvious that Lorenzo was my most unforgettable character in the lives of countless people. I'm delighted that CL is sharing that treasure of his life and legacy with others, and by this program and publishing The Relevance of the Stars. I hope that Manuel is watching today, and Lorenzo has helped so many people to discover the beauty of the stars in the darkest of nights. Yes, we were surprised when he announced that he was going to become a priest, because he seemed to have a dazzling career in science and investigations, and his trajectory was in an entirely different path. But what was always present was that clear piety, his love for Christ and church, and the wonderful talent and energy and joy that he communicated. And so his announcement that he was going to the seminary for all of us was a source of great joy and of great hope.
Thank you, Eminence. I think we can open the Q&A section now. Stephen, or?
Our first question will come from Raymond Fermo.
All right, so a lot of you guys have referenced Monsignor Albacete's background in physics, and I was just curious, what was his field of research, and did he continue that research at all after he became a priest? And more generally, how did that background in science shape him as a man and as a priest?
Should we answer now, or we collect questions? We answer now?
No, go ahead and answer now.
Why don't you answer, Stephen?
I think I'd like to hear what Cardinal O'Malley has to say on this one, actually. What he thinks that background was for him.
Well, his science background was a very important part of his whole life. Lorenzo was a man with interests in so many different fields, and his science and technology background saved our life once. We were at a meeting for Catholic University leaders in Santo Domingo, and the president of the country heard that Cardinal Baum and myself and Lorenzo were going to go to the National Shrine at Higüey, and so we put a helicopter at our disposal, a military helicopter, and as we're flying across Santo Domingo to the Dominican Republic, Lorenzo looks at all of the dials on the panel and he announces that we are running out of fuel and had to make an emergency landing. So I was very grateful for Lorenzo's great technical and scientific knowledge that came in handy at many times, but certainly his ability to connect with secular thinkers around the whole area of faith and science was a great gift to the church. And he was continuously reading and dialoguing on so many of these scientific issues, that particularly those that impinge on our faith. And so I think that his background was a preparation and a preface for the ministry that he did as a priest, particularly his outreach to young people and to intellectuals.
Thank you, Eminence. Next question.
The next question is from Juicy. I cannot find her in the thing to unmute her. She did say I could ask the question for her, but I'm not sure that I understand it. Give me a second.
I just unmuted her.
Thank you.
Hi, this is a great way to work on the encounter. Just curious to see if anyone knows that Monsignor Albacete had a dream for the movement in the US, some task that he couldn't, complete. Some special love, some special dream for GS, for the crew, or the movement in general in the US. Thank you.
I'm sorry, but I don't think I understood the question. There was like a glitch and I lost a few words.
So the question is, if anyone's familiar or aware of any aspect of the life of the movement that Monsignor had a particular passion for, that went unresolved for him. Is there any part that that he really cares about that still is something that other people could support today?
RIRO, what do you say? RIRO disappeared.
I'm here. Honestly, I don't know, because Lorenzo was so open, so curious, and so attentive that wherever he was, there was the center of the world, the center of existence. Right, just a few seconds ago, a friend sent me a note reminding me of a visit in Kansas at a rural parish. There were 6 people in attendance for the presentation of one of Father Giussani's books. And the story that this friend was reminding me is that, okay, of the 6 people, 3 were nuns. And so Lorenzo was there ready to go and speak, and he wouldn't go. And he said, I can't talk. And they asked him, what do you mean you can't talk? I can't talk. RIRO has to sing first. And so I went up to the mic, I sang a song, and we spent the evening with these 6 people. That was the whole universe, because those were the people who were given to him in that specific moment. And they mattered more than anything else. That's why I was saying, could have been clue, college students. If he was with the college students, yes, that was the totality of it. If it was the high school students, yes, same thing. If it was personally with me or with Olivetta or with Jonathan or talking to Vita, yes, that was the center of the universe.
Can I say something, Ollie?
Sure, yep.
going around, that question of the division of CLU, GS, when we were going around, it was like the merry band of, I don't know what it was like, but he would call it the show. And every time we had to go, he says, are we taking the show on the road? And wherever we went, it was the music, it was him, and it was all, I'm a kid from Brooklyn, and we're out in the Midwest, we're out all these Oklahoma strange, but it was like a whirlwind of whatever it was. That was the movement. I couldn't tell you, I can't explain it other than that experience of just this whirlwind of passion for the church as an answer to the question of human happiness. And it exploded because, like Giorgio said, Americans want happiness and don't know how to get it. The blues, music, that's all comes from that crisis. And for some reason, this period, we went around everywhere and everyone was drawn to this man, to this music, to this phenomenon, this whirlwind. And that was, I don't know how to explain the divisions and this and the building and the not building. It was just a number, maybe like the Acts of the Apostles. It was a force, an energy.
We can say that Lorenzo proposed a smiling Catholicism. I think it's very interesting because it's not so frequent that Catholicism is smiling, open, able to build bridges, as Pope Francis says. Smiling doesn't mean not intelligent. Smiling because you understand the true nature of Catholicism. To be able to unify people who are different, not in a generic way, but because Catholicism speaks to your heart, and US starts from this desire of art, of happiness and freedom.
Thank you. We have a couple of questions that all relate to Lorenzo's relationship with his family. So I'm asking Marco Saccaggi to ask his question on behalf of many people.
Thank you, Stephen. A personality like the one of Monsignor Albacete doesn't come out from, it's a gift, but doesn't come out from, thin air, is deeply rooted in some experience. So I was really wondering if somebody can comment regarding the relationship with his parents and how much, his family has in some way shaped the Monsignor Albacete that we know.
Probably, Eminence, maybe you know his
Sure.
family
Well,
better than anybody else.
Lorenzo was certainly very much shaped by his family and was so close to his family. The experience of his father's death when he was very young was certainly a big impact on him. The extraordinary personality of his mother, Doña Conchita, who I think he got his wit from her. She was just a delight and a very, very funny and lively person. And I often tell the story that the day of his first Mass, Conchita had a little reception in her new apartment. And when I got there, she said, "Oh, Father Sean, will you bless my new apartment?" I said, "Conchita, your son was just ordained. Ask him." She said, "I think he's joking." But his family, his devotion to his brother Manuel was also an incredible impact on him. And his life in Santurce and the parish there at Sagrado Corazon and the friendships and the extended family that was there in Puerto Rico was such an influence in his whole life, and he had so many great stories about growing up there and sharing them. And I had the privilege of, visiting his family there in Puerto Rico, and also when they were in Rome and in Washington. And it was very edifying to see how devoted he was to his family. And when his mother became sick, and Lorenzo was always stayed very, very close to her. And I can remember he had a big picture when she was bedridden of this Sacred Heart over the bed, and it said in Spanish, "Thank God anyway, a pesar de todo, gracias, Señor." So it was typical Lorenzo, but his family was a huge a part of his formation and his life, and he was very, very devoted to his family. And as I said, I hope that Manuel is watching us today.
Let me use this opportunity to plug the video. If you have not yet seen the Albacete show, there's a great part in there about his relationship with his dad and his mom, both in his own words. And so I encourage people to listen. We have a question from Tim Herrmann. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. And it's a little bit related to Giorgio, what you spoke about a little bit earlier about his Puerto Rican roots, his Latin experience.
Yeah, just simply one of the things that struck me most about Lorenzo was I had met the movement in Latin America. When I came to the US, I met this man that I'd never expected to meet, who happened to be Latino, but also somehow totally understanding of the United States. And I quickly understood it was because he was from Puerto Rico. And so I was wondering if you guys could just talk a little bit more about how his being Latino, but being part of the American experience helped him to speak to people like me, and also just to the American faith, which tends to be much more Protestant, as we know. But he really had a unique ability to get right in and hit our hearts faster than anybody I'd ever met.
I do invite Stephen to say something here, because I think you have a lot in common with Monsignor here.
No, you keep bringing me into this. For me, the clear thing about it is that I grew up in this country, much like him growing up in Puerto Rico, in a Latin Catholic family where we didn't really know that there were non-Latin Catholics. I didn't know the difference between being Mexican and being Catholic. It was the same thing. The ones who weren't Mexicans weren't Catholics in my experience. And so when I met Lorenzo, I was completely, I was at home. He didn't have a Latin faith. He had a faith that came from an experience in his family and his culture in which everything spoke of Christ. And so there wasn't a lot of conflict or question. He didn't have these theoretical problems of whether or not Jesus was real, because he had always kind of experienced him in his life, and it was as normal as getting up and having your café con leche in the morning. So at some level, that I think that Lorenzo's experience was not truncated. There wasn't like someone asked a question about dualism, and I'll get to your question too, Amy, if somebody wants to speak about why he spoke about dualism so much. But for him, there was no dualism in the experience of the church. There was not, this intellectual ideological component. There was just life, and it was fun, and it was fiesta, and it was celebration. There's a point in the video where he talks about when we're sad, we dance. When we're happy, we dance. When something terrible happens, we sing. Like this is the experience that that all of life is full of this kind of life. And in the American church in particular, where there's kind of like this influence on like piety and morality, it was never scandalous to have people who believed in Jesus who were sinners. We all were. And Lorenzo was comfortable with that. And it was never scandalous to have somebody who might have, he tells us a great story of the joke he makes about the robber who goes in to steal something from a store and they have a statue of the Virgin Mary, and he says, "Oh, we can't rob here because they'll think the Virgin Mary didn't protect them." Like this is Lorenzo's faith that he had, and this is the one that I grew up with too. We didn't smoke cigarettes behind the church. We went across the street. Whatever it is that we could get away with as kids, we had that sense, and he had that too.
Olivetta?
Yes.
I remember he talked a lot about the tension in America between the individual and community. And it goes, there's always this structure. He said the Spanish community was the community that had both of those things. And that's why it could contribute so much to American culture. Now, me as a Sephardic Jew, had a very close relationship with the Spanish aspect of things, because the idea that our faith has to have a people, a communion, and once you have the people, things make a lot more sense, So that aspect of his being the Spanish, that it's a people with a history, and that was important.
Thank you, Jonathan, because to the question of before about his family, I would just add that, yeah, his family was part of a people. I could tell the few times I was in Puerto Rico with him, but also in the way he was talking about Puerto Rico. That was really his family. He's been from Puerto Rico, from Santurce, and those were not just places where he spent some years of his life. Those were part of him, like his family. I could tell the way he was talking with the people when he would meet somebody there or somebody from there. He was like, that is his family also. They were not friends from Puerto Rico. They were part of him, as if that was his family, And in fact, if you think that his family basically was just his brother, because all the rest of the family had died. But I never had the impression that he was like an orphan or something, because the bond with his neighbor or the guy or his classmates, oh my God, his classmates, they were really part of him. He would talk about them as if the way I would talk about my sister, literally, Do we have another question? One last question, Stephen?
We do have a question. I think that it's one anyone can answer. So I'm going to go ahead and I don't know what your name is, Slat, but he has a question about how Monsignor's humor relates to the rest of his personality.
I'm sorry, Giorgio Vittadini has to leave us and he's greeting everybody. Thank you, Giorgio. Thank you very much. Sorry.
Hello, am I on?
Yes. Hi, Noah.
Hello. Good to see you, Olivetta. In the face of the mystery, many people might have the response of reverence, but I wonder if Monsignor's humor was his intellectual response to seeing the truth and mystery, and that's one of the things that endeared him to people.
Eminence, what would you say? Because I still remember one time we came to Boston to visit you, and that was the first time that I saw the two of you together. And I was so thrilled because there was a humor that would be like, was like I don't know, like two poles, you know. One would start a sentence and the other one would finish it with una battuta, with a funny, you know, and it was, so I don't know, both of you were part of this humor. Was like part of the love that you had for each other, the preference that you had for each other. I don't know, maybe you can say something.
Well, Lorenzo was a very gifted person, and part of his giftedness and intellectual ability was to be able to appreciate the absurd in things, and to but at a deeper level, I think it was an expression of the joy of the gospel. And here is a man who, despite all of his liabilities and weaknesses, felt so much loved by God, and it gave him a lot of freedom, and he communicated that joy through his humor, and it certainly was a gift in a way that allowed him to connect with a lot of people who, in their sadness or in their fears or their worries, felt rescued by Lorenzo. And so often the point of contact, what turned the light on, was the joy that he communicated with his great and zany wit. But it was a gift that I think allowed people to glimpse the joy and the love that he had in his own heart.
Thank you, Eminence. I think we have to close now. I invite everybody, first of all, thank to everybody who spoke, also the people who made questions. And